this tutorial I want to look at how synchronous technology can take away a lot of the problems that you may have in modifying designs and giving you the flexibility to design as you want to. So here's a old assembly, and we want to widen these flanges by 30mm overall. So the first thing that we'll need to do, being an ordered part, is to edit the main part. So we'll need to widen this. The first thing you need to do is just make sure that you can understand how this thing was built. So we can see just by hovering over here we can modify this feature. Not quite sure how it was modeled, so we just need to look at it. So nicely constrained, no width on here, so we'll just place a dimension on here and change that to 120. So that one works nice and simple. Good design, and everything else falls into place. This one's mirrored. The holes are obviously concentric, so we can come out of here, and you'll see that these are wrong. You've got failed relationships which will eventually sort themselves out. So let's come down and edit this part, and we'll do the same on here. So there's our protrusion. If we go edit the sketch, no dimensions again, so we'll chuck a dimension on here and change that to 120. As you can see, sketch isn't very well constrained, so we'll just do the obvious ones. Place a horizontal vertical tangency between these, and that should now constrain our sketch correctly. So 120, and still not giving us quite what we want. Let's put an equality between these rounds, just like the other one had, so that constrains that. And I can also see that we've got no sort of symmetry coming in here, so let's just apply that as well. So now when we change our value here, we have it behaving as we would like. And as we close out and return, yep, it's come in. Obviously, being square, weren't too fussy about which relationships were constrained to what. So we can come back in here and just reposition that. So that completes the first edit. Now let's look at the same model. So this is an exact copy, and these two parts have been converted to synchronous. So using our select tool, we can use face priority, which allows us to select faces from multiple parts. So if we click on there and there, we can adjust those two faces together. The design intent makes sure that the holes stay concentric, so we can just put in a value here and adjust that. So you can see that even though we didn't fix up this part here with the geometry, Synchronous manages to control that for us. So like we did before, if we go and pick up on this, we can edit those relationships. last one is the hole. So now you can see that we've actually managed to rebuild that a lot quicker than we would in ordered. So let's look at a second edit. Let's take the handle here and we'll add a 5-degree tilt and we'll move it out by 10 mil. So double clicking on it, we can see that it is ordered at this stage. So let's look at switching this across. If we look at it, we've got a protrusion cut out, sketch to define the loft, then we've got a protrusion, and then the loft and the rounded piece on the end and a rad in there. So let's move that down into here because Synchronous doesn't handle the lofts and sweeps quite as easily as ordered, so we'll leave that as is, but we will take this and move that all into Synchronous. So we have our model exactly as it was before. If we look carefully, we've seen that the loft goes between a sketch just inside the face here and a sketch which is effectively the same as the end of the handle, or that protrusion for the handle. Just because we want to be able to tweak it, let's redefine that loft. So if we take these two out and we'll regenerate it, and that profile there I'm just going to delete. So creating our loft, we can use the select from sketch, and we'll come from this point down here onto the end of the handle. Right mouse click to move on, and we'll use tangent continuous at both ends to define that shape as we had before. We can also add in our radius. Maybe a little bit too large. We'll just change it down to 1 and finish that. So now we have our model which is mostly synchronous, and we have our loft in the middle as a ordered. Now, as I said before, we want to take this area. Let's just move our steering wheel onto here, and let's move that out 10 mil as we said. And then we want to put a drop down 5 mil. And as you can see, that loft comes straight back in. If we'd left it working off the sketch, that wouldn't have worked quite so well. So we've quickly made those edits that we want to, and we can close and return back to our assembly. So now we've done our synchronous edit, let's go back to our ordered version, and we'll double click on here, and again we've got a bit of an understanding of how this is built now from looking at the one that we converted from ST. So we need to edit this protrusion here, and that is built off of, I'm assuming, a plane which is offset here. So if we click in here, we can, let's come back out of there. Okay, so double clicking on okay, so looking more closely, we can see that we have a dimension up here for where that's going, so we'll move that out by 10 mil. That's the easy bit. Now we want to have this handle pointing downwards. So if we look at our lofted protrusion, as we remember, that's built off a sketch. So let's turn that sketch back on, and we need to tilt that down by 5 mil. Unfortunately, we can't do that as easily, and we need to maybe do a new sketch. So we'll take a parallel plane from here, and we can sort of bring it out to this point. Unfortunately, that's still not giving us what we need, so we'll take parallel plane from there. That's going to be 65. Then we need to angle that round, and we need to create an angle plane. And that needs to be 5 degrees. So then we need to draw our profile on here. But hang on a minute, that's going to only affect the loft. We still need to change that portion there. So we're basically saying that we need to rebuild that, and we need to rebuild that. We'll then need to rebuild that as well. So from here you can see that going down an ordered route, where things are sort of known how they're going to be built, it's fine. When you get these sort of like slight changes that affect the overall profile or the angle, things suddenly start to become a little bit more complex. So we're having to look at having to rebuild this whole section. Now you've got to remember that this is a simple part, so as you get more complex parts, those sort of design changes become a lot more complex, and this is why people quite often end up having to redesign something, you know, straight back from the start. So, you know, even with the best will in the world, it's easy to see that your perceived perceptions of how things might change can quite often differ from real world scenarios. So just think about how much time you would save by using synchronous technology.